Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for allowing us to present today. I'm here with my colleague Stacy Coulthard, and we're going to be presenting. It's been a while. I don't know if we've even done a lunch and learn actually for you all. So we're so happy to be here. There's a lot that we can talk about right now, but the purpose of our presentation is going to be focusing on your work with international students and addressing their needs. And we have a very important little asterisk that's on this first slide that says it's been updated this month, but these requirements, or I would say the information that's contained in this presentation, is subject to change. That's going to be kind of a recurring theme throughout our presentation, but we just wanted to make sure you all were all aware of that. We are recording this presentation, so I believe it will be sent out, or you can ask for a recording by request after the presentation, and we can also send out the slides once we're done. So a little bit about ourselves. My name is Noelle Salaz. It's nice to see some familiar faces and names. Thanks for joining. I'm the Associate Director of the International Student Services Office. I've been here almost 20 years. I've worked in the same office this entire time. And I love it. I love the population that we work with and the specific responsibilities that I have within the office. Some of those responsibilities include advising and outreach for our new international students. So I work really closely with the admissions team and new student services to make sure that they have a good experience when they arrive to the university. I also assist with advising that we have every day at the ISS office, help with programming and events, our Global Ambassador Student Worker team. And then right now it's also a busy time because I also assist with our international student tax compliance issues. So there's a lot to keep us busy right now, but I'm just so happy to be part of this office and to be able to support this population. I'll go ahead and hand it off to Stacy so she can introduce herself too.
Hello, I'm Stacy Coulthard, and I'm the Program Director for SEVIS Compliance, which is Immigration Compliance. And that is the main responsibility for my position. I also do immigration advising for F1 and J1 students, all aspects of immigration advising. I have been at the ISS office for, let's see, 13 years. So it's been a while, and we're constantly seeing changes with requirements and regulations. So we do everything we can to keep up with that ever changing requirements. Um, all right, we'll go ahead and get started. So the International Student Services Office, I just want to give you an overview and some information about our office. We are the main support for over 3,500 F1 and J1 international students. We have approximately 20 staff members, and we also have immigration advising offered daily. We provide support in these areas of the international student experience: pre-arrival and arrival, support for new students. With that, we provide information to students about the immigration and visa process. And then when students arrive to the US, we have actually partnered with the Tucson Airport to provide free Lyft rides to the students to go from the airport to the U of A, or within 2 miles of the U of A. We provide a virtual orientation for the students, and we also have quite a few events at the beginning of the semester and throughout the semester, and we'll talk about that later. As far as maintaining status, we send international students reminders through our newsletter, through emails about how to maintain status, and I'll go into that in a later slide. Employment and practical training. We help to facilitate work authorization for students. We'll be talking about employment later in the presentation. Sponsored students. So these are students in which their educational expenses are covered by a third party, typically a government, but it could be an organization as well. We have mental health counseling. We have a licensed social worker who's dedicated to working with international students and serving their unique needs. Again, more information about this later in the presentation. We provide support for students to get involved on campus. Again, we have a variety of programs and events for students, and we'll go into that in detail later. And we also liaise with federal, state, and local agencies on behalf of the students if needed. All right, so about our population, we have, as of fall 2024, our total international student population is 3,639 students. Out of those, 1,721 are undergraduate students, and we also have 520 sponsored students. The top 5 countries where students are from are India, China, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Mexico in that order. And we've seen a pretty big shift over the last few years where China used to be our largest population, and now that's shifted to Indian students. The most popular majors for international students is computer science, business management, geosciences, economics, and no major selected a center. All right. So even though we have some J1 students, majority of our students are on an F1 student visa. So we'll just focus on the F1 immigration documents and requirements. Yes, thank you for clarifying. The top countries and majors are at the undergraduate level. So I'm going to be talking about these documents in detail. These are the documents that international students are all required to have: a Form I-20, their passport, their F1 visa, and their I-94. And I'll go ahead and start with the F1 visa. So this is the document that serves as proof that the student's been admitted to a full-time program of study at a U.S. educational institution and has demonstrated sufficient financial resources to cover their studies and living expenses. So all students get this I-20. This is what it looks like. I know it's a little difficult to see here, but it has the student's biographical information on it, their program of study, their level of study, their degree completion date. We typically issue bachelor's programs for 4 years because that is the average length of time it takes to complete the program. We list their educational expenses and funding for 1 academic year. And on the I-20, there's also a space for authorization for benefits, such as practical training. And there's also a space for travel signatures. The student visa is obtained in the student's home country. They would have to apply for this in person at a U.S. embassy or consulate outside of the U.S. The student first needs the I-20 to show that they've been admitted to a university, and then they can apply for their visa. The visa is a travel document. It's used to present at the U.S. port of entry it's used to request permission to enter the U.S. And I just want to go over real quick the difference between visa and status. So the visa, like I said, is a travel document. We think of it like a key to enter a house. You need the key to enter the house. You need the visa to enter the US. And then once you're in the house or in the US, you don't really need that key anymore. The visa can expire while the student's in the US, but if they want to leave the US, then they have to renew their visa at that time. And the I-20 is a reflection of their status that they need to keep that I-20 up to date. The I-94 is a record of the non-immigrant's arrival and departure to and from the US. It's automatically recorded and students can obtain a copy of their travel history. The I-94 is issued by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security under U.S. Custom and Border Protection, and it reflects the student's immigration status that they were admitted into. So it should show F1 and for how long. For this gets a little complicated, but for our students, there's no actual end date. Instead, the end date will show as D/S, which stands for duration of status, which means that as long as the student is engaged in a program of study, then they are legally allowed to remain for as long as they need to complete the study within reason. And yes, it is very common for the student to be in the US in a valid status. As long as their F1 is valid, they can have an expired visa, and that's okay. So in order to address the needs of international students, we wanted to outline some requirements that international students have to maintain their status. They are required to enroll full-time every semester. They're required to report their US address, and if they move addresses, they're required to report that. They need to report any academic changes. So if they change major or if they change a degree level, we need to be notified. They can only work with authorization, and they have to travel with proper documentation. So full-time enrollment for undergrads. During the fall and spring semesters, students need to be enrolled in a minimum of 12 units every semester. Out of those 12 units, at least 9 units have to be in-person coursework. The remaining 3+ units can be either in-person or online. And in-person is considered any type of course with an in-person element. Hybrid courses, flex in-person, those all count as in-person. After the semester begins, we place a restriction in U-Access, preventing the student from dropping below full-time. This is to prevent students from falling out of status. Now, students can still fall out of status if they're enrolled in too many online classes, but this is some type of prevention. And then sponsored students sometimes are restricted to taking only in-person classes, so they need to request from their sponsor approval before they can take online or even, in their case, hybrid courses. In the summer and winter sessions, no enrollment is required if the students are continuing students. That is their break. If they do start their program in the summer, then the first class they take has to be in person. And if they finish in the summer, then their final course they take has to be in person to show that they have reason to be in the US. There are some exceptions to full-time enrollment. If the student is in their final semester, and let's just say they only need 6 units to graduate, they can enroll for the 6 units, and then they can request an exemption of the full-time enrollment based on it being their final semester. They can only have one online course in their final semester. The remaining units have to be in person. If students have a medical issue and they cannot continue with their program due to that medical condition, they can request an exemption of the full-time enrollment to either part-time or no enrollment at all for that semester. They do need to have documentation from a medical provider substantiating the medical condition. And then academic difficulty. This does not come up very often, and it can only be in the student's first semester. If they have any difficulty with American teaching methods, or they were improperly placed in the course, or if they have lack of proper English or reading skills, that could be a reason for an exemption. Again, there needs to be documentation for all of these different exemptions. All right, so this is what I deal with a lot of my responsibility includes status violations. So students can violate their immigration status if they enroll in too many online units to count toward their full-time enrollment, if they don't enroll at all, or drop below full-time without first getting authorization from our office to drop, if they fail to extend their I-20 before it expires. So again, the students, we issue the I-20 for 4 years. If the student needs additional time, they would have to request a program extension on their I-20. If they don't do that and they have not graduated, then they'll fall out of status. If they're academically ineligible, they'll fall out of status. Or if they work off campus without first obtaining authorization from our office, that is probably the most serious status violation, working without authorization. The consequences can be pretty severe if they do violate their status. They may have to depart the US. There's a possibility that they can apply for reinstatement to regain their status while they're in the US. Both processes, in order to regain their status, it takes time and money, and there's no guarantee of it, but they can certainly try, and they would just work with our office to try to regain their status. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Noelle to talk about employment.
Well, thank you so much, Stacy. I know Stacy covered a lot of the basics, and it's hard for us to know how much you all are familiar with some of these immigration requirements and anything about advising international students. So apologize if some of this is very basic. But again, please ask questions in the chat if you have certain questions, and we'll do our best to try to answer them too. So F1 student employment, I think there's often a misconception that international students can't work, period. And so just want to clarify that they can work on campus without permission from us. So this is a really great way for our students to get involved, get some work experience, earn some extra money, and it doesn't require permission from us. The minute that they step off campus, then it does. And I'll go over that in the next couple slides. But these are the number of hours that they're allowed to work per week. It depends on if it's part of the regular semester or if it's during a break. So that will affect how many hours they're permitted to work. There's also a misconception that students need a social security number to work, but it's actually the opposite way around. They need to get a job first, and then they can work with our office to get that social security number. Okay, so I mentioned if a student wants to do something off campus, they need to get permission from our office. That comes in two different forms. So we have what's called curricular practical training, or CPT. Some of you might be really familiar with this. And then also optional practical training, or OPT. So curricular practical training, or CPT, can only be used while the student is still pursuing their degree. And it is a benefit that they have to apply for, regardless of whether that opportunity is paid or unpaid. So that's really important. Sometimes it gets really difficult to determine if a student is doing just a true volunteer experience or if it's an experience that requires CPT. In those cases, if you're ever unsure, always refer the student to us, or message us on Teams, or send an email to us, call our office so that we can provide some guidance for you. But I always say, if you're not sure, please refer them to us. So the conditions that a student has to meet to be able to qualify for CPT are listed here, directly related to the field of study, the major field of study, not the minor, required or integral part of the curriculum, full-time for 1 academic year, being in good academic standing, being admitted into the major. And then if they're approved, they can work up to 20 hours during the school year and full-time during the breaks. So the approval process does require you as well, because we need to document how the experience is a required or integral part of the curriculum. So the student also needs to have an offer letter. This is one difference between CPT and OPT, which I'll describe next, but they have to have a job first before they can submit an application. job or internship experience offer. So they need an offer letter, they need to get academic advisor approval. And as part of this whole process, once we have those things, then we can review it and give final authorization. Here are the types of areas where we will ask you to comment if a student applies for CPT. So they'll initiate by submitting an e-form. They'll indicate who their major advisor is, include your email. You'll get an email saying, this student has applied for CPT. Please click on this link to fill out your portion of the form. I'm not even sure if that's the accurate wording, but it's something like that. And so the types of things that you'll be expected to confirm and comment on are listed here. Graduation, what is the applicable coursework? How is it required or integral to the program? What are the outcomes and how will their experience be evaluated? If your students or if you would like to learn more, there is a CPT tutorial on our website that students are actually required to complete before they're given authorization to participate in CPT. If you would like more information, we're happy to do a webinar or present, come in person, online, whatever the format to your department. So because it is involved, these types practical training does often result in a lot of questions from departments, and we're always happy to help. Optional practical training is another type of work authorization, a benefit for our F1 students that is in general used after a student graduates. So they apply before they graduate usually, and it's generally used for them to gain experience in their field of study once they're done with their program. Again, has to be in the major field of study. And a big difference between OPT and CPT is that you don't actually need a job offer to apply. You apply for the authorization first, and then students have a certain amount of time to be able to find a job to make sure that they maintain their status. Similar to CPT, this also requires your input, and the approval process requires you to confirm their expected graduation date. This process is a little bit more involved because our office gives a recommendation after receiving your information, and then the student has to turn around and apply to the US government for final approval. So whereas CPT generally takes about 2 weeks for our office to approve, OPT can take 3 to 4 months for approval. So right now is a very busy time for our office because a lot of the students who are graduating in May are submitting these OPT forms to start that process. We also do regular OPT workshops for our students, and we advertise those on our calendar. So, we talk to students all the time about employment. That's probably one of the most common reasons why a student might come in and talk to us. But there's also I don't know if it's an hour and a half presentation that we give once a month that talks in detail about OPT. Some of you who have worked with our students, whether it's for an extension of their I-20 or CPT or OPT, might be already familiar with MyGlobal. And it's a portal that our office uses to keep track of all our international student files, records, communications, requests for immigration document updates. So if you're not familiar with it, this is where an email would come from if we need your approval for certain student requests. Certain requests, I've already mentioned some of these, like if a student needs more time. Stacy mentioned at the very beginning that we issue the standard undergraduate I-20 for 4 years. There's some programs that require more than that, so we issue accordingly. But in general, those are issued for 4-year time span. So if a student, is needing an extra semester or an extra year to complete their program, they would need to initiate the request in this portal called MyGlobal. Other requests, applying for practical training, and then also, like Stacy had mentioned, if a student has a medical issue, or they're in their last semester, or they have a documented academic difficulty, then they could apply for an exemption from that 12-unit a semester requirement. So all our forms are in this portal. And then really important, I want to point out this last sentence on the slide. If you ever feel uncomfortable with approving a student's request, or whether that's, I'm not sure if this internship is a good fit for the student's major, or I don't know why the student needs more time to complete their degree, or I'm not actually sure what I'm supposed to put in this form, anything like that, please just contact us directly. It's easier for us to just have a conversation about what's going on. We can only see so much from the form and what's inputted there, but being able to discuss the situation with you provides us with a lot of insight and information before we do anything. All right, so this is a really good slide to maybe take a screenshot of or just kind of bookmark. But reasons that you would direct a student to our office. I know we get lots of referrals from departments. Thank you so much. Please keep up that good work. But here are some examples. If you're meeting with a student and these things come up, that's a good indicator that we're probably going to be involved. So if they need more time to complete their degree, right now, in addition to practical training, we're getting a lot of requests for students who are realizing that they have one more semester left to finish up, or a year. So please direct them to our office. If they want to take time off their program, really important. If you're meeting with a student and they say, I want to take a gap year, or I'm going to take a semester off, or let me see, this is not on here, but I'm not going to continue at the U of A. Those are all reasons to direct them to us, because it is our responsibility to make sure that the information that is on their I-20 is accurate and matching what they plan to do. And if a student doesn't plan to enroll, then we need to take action on their immigration record. Course changes that affect immigration status. I just want to thank all of you who've already reached out regarding this situation, because I think I was just talking to someone yesterday about this. If you notice that a student is in a course and that modality of the course changes to an online course, and this could affect that balance of the 9 units of being in person or hybrid and the 12 units total, please let us know. Or if a course becomes canceled and that jeopardizes the student's ability to maintain 12 units, that's another good example of letting us know. We don't always know when these things happen. And so it's really helpful for us to know. You all might have more information or might be notified before us if these things happen. It helps us out a lot in being able to advise a student. Student not being able to meet full-time enrollment requirements. Was just talking to an advisor about this yesterday. So this sometimes happens in the summer and winter, but it could happen at any semester. So if a student has, 9 units that are left, they need to take, and all 9 of them are online, well, that's going to be a problem. Okay. Or if a course that they need to take is not offered in the fall semester. These are all situations where we would need to talk to you and also to the student to figure out what kind of options they have. If you know a student who has mental health or adjustment issues, Stacy mentioned that we have a CAPS counselor, and we have a slide dedicated just to her and her services. She sees students all the time. I mean, we can also assist with mental health and adjustment, but we have a specialist on hand, and students can see her for free. So we really, really want to encourage them to go see her. We're so lucky. We're just really lucky to have a resource like that in our office. And then students on probation or students who are ineligible to continue, of course, that will have an effect on their status. So this is another population that you can direct to our office. I have a feeling after this presentation, we're going to have so many students who come in, and that's great. That's what we want. And then, okay, wanted to go over this quickly, but we have some common myths about international students that come up too. So one of them being that all international students are well off financially. This is not always the case. And yes, it's true that international students do have to show that they have a sufficient financial guarantee amount to be able to get that I-20 and subsequently that visa. But we see plenty of students who, for some reason, that family support is not available. their country is in crisis and they're not able to have access to money. We have some students who have a really hard time opening bank accounts in the US. We see all sorts of things. And I think our population is definitely changing. So students are needing more financial support. It's very hard being an international student in the US. And sometimes it's their entire family who's pulling together money. And anything could happen to that money. So I just want to point out and emphasize that this is not always the case. Most international students stay in the US after graduation. It's actually not that many students who end up staying in the US after graduation. We do have a lot of students who do stay on. We definitely see more at the graduate level, but it's not as many as what people would think. Most international students are from China. Stacy debunked this already. For most of my time here at the U of A, probably Stacy's as well, our biggest population was from China, but now that has, for the first time, has been surpassed by India. We have most of our students from India. International students need to be sponsored on work visas to work off campus. Well, we went over a couple options in terms of practical training with you all. So students do not need a work visa if they're approved for practical training. If their practical training runs out, then it's possible that they need to have a different type of visa to be able to stay in the US. But I think this is a common myth that is held, especially by US employers. And then finally, that international students do not seek assistance for mental health. I think Stacy and I had a conversation about this as we were preparing this presentation, that I think, yes, that stigma is still there, that, it's shameful to maybe seek assistance for mental health. But what we're seeing in terms of the numbers that our CAPS counselor is seeing and how busy she is sometimes booked out a couple weeks in advance. She's definitely seeing our students. So, we continuously have to work towards breaking down that stigma, but our students are seeking support, and it's great to see that. We wanted to point out some things that are working really well for us right now, some of the wins and the highlights. Arizona International, which we are part of, recently won an award from our professional organization called the Paul Simon Award for Internationalization. We are also recognized by the Arizona International Educators Organization. This semester, for the first time ever, we were able to have a one-time emergency fund for our international students, and we were able to award 9 students with small sums of money to be able to pay for things like medical or dental expenses or things that have come up that were unexpected. So that was a one-time emergency fund. We were happy, and if we can find funds later on, it's something that we hope to continue, but it was nice to be able to provide that support. And then we launched a podcast. I think it's been 2 years at least, maybe going on 3 now, that we have a podcast. We have a team in our office, and we often interview international students, international faculty, non-international faculty and students, just to talk about that experience of adjusting to a new culture here in the United States. So there are dozens of episodes. It's on Spotify, and it's a great resource for anyone who's working with students and students themselves. So we talked a lot about Denise, our CAPS counselor. She is a licensed social worker, and like we mentioned already, our F1 and J1 students, as long as they're enrolled, they can see her for free, okay? This is a really great service, and she, like I said, she's constantly busy. She has a special gift for working with international students and just being very empathetic and understanding of their situations. So we're just happy to have her, and we often say we don't even know what we did before she was in our office. We're just happy to have her here. So just know that we have that service. Stacy kind of hinted at this earlier too, but we do a lot of different programs. This picture right here is our airport welcome team. So we have a team of students who's available at the airport 1 to 2 weeks before the semester starts to make sure that they get situated, any initial questions answered. We provide them with welcome bags, and then we make sure that they get a ride from the Tucson airport to wherever they're living. We're pretty proud of this service. It's always nice when you're traveling somewhere to have someone there to meet you. We have monthly free shopping trips to the Lely International Supermarket. We have monthly meetups at the Global Center, field trips, and then some of the workshops that are listed here. We did, for the first time ever, we did a spring break trip last semester, not last semester, last week. It feels like last semester, where we took students to the roller rink. And we got a lot of positive feedback on that and how that was a truly American experience for our students. All right. And so we're working always hard to build community because we know that it's difficult, being in a new country. So we have a Global Ambassador Student Worker Team. These are students who are trained to assist our new international students with that adjustment experience. They're present at all our events. They're present at the airport when students arrive, and they also manage the second thing that's listed here, which is our WhatsApp community. So we have a virtual WhatsApp community where students can ask any question they would like. Some of the things that I see in there is just, questions about SIM cards or certain grocery stores that people are looking for, advice that they're seeking from other international students. We partner with an organization in the community called International Friends. So if you are wanting to pair up with an international student, this is not a live-in host program, but just a friendship program. If you're ever wanting to have a friendship with an international student, the organization is always looking for hosts. So sorry, I just saw someone was in the waiting room for a long time. This is a great way to get involved and to provide our students with that home away from home. It's some of the feedback that I hear from students is just how thankful they are to have a connection off campus and to be able to have a home cooked meal or just learn from a local community member. So it's a great opportunity for cultural exchange, and anyone here is welcome to join. And then we have a lot of different clubs, obviously, at the U of A, but we have a page on our website that lists out some of the clubs that have a specific focus for students from certain regions or countries. All right. In addition to the things that we're very proud of and excelling at, we also want to acknowledge that there's lots of challenges that we're dealing with right now. And the biggest one is probably the top one that's on this list, the current administration. So some of you might have questions about that. We do too. Right now, we are just in a kind of a holding pattern, and we're monitoring the news all the time to find out what any potential changes might be. So, travel is a big question that's coming up from our students. We're hearing from you all too that, whether or not it is prudent to be sending something out. But we're waiting to find out what the specific policy changes will be. We're waiting for official notification from the administration before we send out any messaging. Just because we don't know, specifically related to travel, we don't know what the final list of countries will be. We don't know the final list of visa types that will be impacted. During the last round of travel bans, I guess, international students were not the focus of that travel ban, even though it was extremely confusing and caused a lot of fear among us and our population. So we just don't know. We're not really sure where the administration is going to go with that. So we are waiting. We have, and I'll go over this later, we have an announcements page. We talk about this constantly on a daily basis, just wanting to be prepared in case something happens. And we will send out messaging to our students once we find out more information. Academic and cultural challenges are always things that are brought up by our students. We have a set of 5 tutorials for our students that they are supposed to complete. One of them focuses on the American college experience. So we talk about things like credit hours and academic integrity, participation, office hours, reading your syllabus. I feel like there's so much in there. And of course, right now I can't think of everything that's in there. But we definitely acknowledge and know that the academic systems that our students are coming from may be very different from what they're used to. So we have some resources in place for students to be able to learn more. I had a student not too long ago who was really shocked to learn about an attendance quiz that was being administered in D2L as a means to track attendance. That was also new to me. I didn't know that was being done. And so that we're also learning and trying our best to make sure that our students are aware of some of these things that they need to do being in a different system. Cultural as well. A lot of our students, I think for most of them, this is their first time in the United States. Okay. And so that process of adjusting to a new culture, it really takes time. And I know many of them are anxious to be adjusted and integrated as soon as they arrive, but then often finding that it just takes a lot more time. And so I'm trying to remember. Yeah. I mean, this quote at the bottom is kind of a good representation of a lot of these things. I like the last sentence there, just saying, hopefully everything will be fine soon. Often our students say, I just need a little bit more time to adjust. So we check in with our new students, especially, and we do a questionnaire at the beginning of each semester just to see how they're doing, and connect them with resources, reach out, because we know that that process can be really challenging. Mental health, of course, like we said, often some of the issues that come up, anxiety, depression, homesickness, transitioning, dealing with crises at home, relationship issues. We have some couples who maybe one of them is here in the United States and the other one is back home and just trying to navigate that. I mean, I can barely navigate it in my own city and home. I can't imagine having to try to manage this internationally. There's just so much that our students are dealing with. Employment, of course, like I said, I think employment is probably our number one reason for a student to come to ISS and visit us for advising. But it's more than just knowing what forms to submit and the process. It's also just navigating how to be employed in the US and marketing yourself as an international student, convincing employers that you can use CPT or OPT and do not necessarily need sponsorship right off the bat. Becoming familiar with what a standard resume or a cover letter looks like and how to conduct yourself in an interview. So we hear a lot about that too. And then, whoops, I almost skipped one. Financial issues, like I said, not all our students come here with, fully supported by their families or themselves. There are a lot of and it's very difficult because our students don't qualify for federal financial aid, and it's extremely hard to get a loan. So we also get a lot of students who come in and talk to us during advising about financial support. And unfortunately, our office, other than that one-time fund, we do not really have the financial support for students. So, we're talking to them about, like what options they have from other family or other friends, or ways to maybe take courses in the summer or take courses at Pima if that's an option for them. Okay, I feel like we have a couple more slides and I just want to make sure that we get through them. So this slide, if any of you attended the orientation for graduate students, I'm reusing this slide. I like it because what I did is I asked a couple of our global ambassadors, our international students, I said, if you were to give advice to people that work with you on a daily basis, like your academic advisors or us, people who aren't international, maybe, what would you say to them? And these are the things that they had to say. So one, make an effort to learn about my culture. I thought that was really nice. Ask me what I think about American culture, the U of A in Tucson. I love asking students about that, I like asking them about food. I hear a lot of comments about how we have a lot of fast food, which I think is true. But then I also hear from our international students how much they love canes. I always find that really funny. Learn how to say my name properly. I think this is a really important one that I often forget, trying to be better about this, but just A student's name carries so much meaning and so much value, and it's important for us to be able to pronounce their names correctly, okay? And be prepared to explain how your name is pronounced too. You know, it works both ways. So I think I love asking students also what their name means. You can learn a whole lot about a student just from that question. Number four, be open to challenging your own cultural biases. We talk about that a lot in our office. And then also understand that we won't understand everything about each other's culture. So it is a process. We know that, but we try really hard to do these things. All right. Okay, it looks like we have about 13 minutes left, but we've reached the end of the presentation. We wanted to make sure that if you had questions, that we would have time to answer them. But wanted to leave you all with some contact information. If you have students who are concerned about, especially potential travel bans, anything related to the current administration, basically anything that we went over in this presentation, please have them join us for advising. So the top link contains information about how they can join for advising, or if they want to schedule an appointment, a longer appointment with an advisor. And then I mentioned that, we're closely monitoring the landscape and policy changes. And so our plan is to provide information on our announcements page, which is the second link there, and then also email students once we hear anything. Our physical location is in the Global Center on Park Avenue. I just realized that phone number is wrong. It's 621-4627. Sorry about that. We'll correct that before sending out the slide. You can always call, you can always email, but we're always open to Teams too. I actually prefer that. Stacey, you can talk about your preference, but I think it's great for you all to reach out any way possible. We are really thankful when you hand off a student to us, and any opportunity that we have to work with you to help a student and their situation. So, okay. I think we can turn to questions now.
We have a few questions in the chat box. Let's see. So the first question is curious about what factors are taken into consideration for international students to demonstrate they can prove the financial aspects. The tool on the financial aid website can be somewhat misleading to domestic students. So we actually have a calculator for international students to review. I'm just going to put it in the chat box. So this calculates their cost of attendance, the tuition and fees, the living expenses, and health insurance. And in order to prove that students have at least one academic year's funding, they would need to provide either a bank statement from themselves or a family member or friend, or if they have a scholarship, they can provide proof of that. A letter of the scholarship is fine. If they have an assistantship, which I know is not very common for undergrads, but if they do, they can provide proof of that. But mostly we need to see that their funds are readily available. So a bank statement usually covers that. I think there's other questions. All right. Let's see. How do you handle international students who have documentation recommending that they drop below full-time for academic difficulties, but they are past their first semester? So we wouldn't be able to authorize a reduced course load for academic difficulties after the first semester. So refer them to us, and we can talk to them about their options. If they have a medical issue, and that could be mental health or physical, they might be able to drop below full-time for that reason. But if they have academic difficulty, they should really come forward in the first semester.
Okay, do we have other questions that are unanswered? Okay, yeah, so there's Denise, if an international student is not enrolled full-time, would the issue be resolved by adding another 3-unit course to be considered in full-time? Do we also direct them to ISS for further clarification of maintaining status? Mostly yes and yes. So yeah, just make sure in addition to them meeting the 12-unit requirement each semester, each fall and spring semester, they also have to meet that 9 units in person total or in person or hybrid. So in general, yes, if they add if they were at 9 and they added 3, then that should meet their minimum total requirement, but it may not necessarily meet the 9-unit requirement. So it's also modality. It's modality and total that need to be considered.
And
But
they
you
do
can,
also have time if they or if they have too many online units, they do have a certain amount of time to fix that mistake. They have up to 21 days in general.
all
All
right.
right.
Do international students on the online campus also have access to the ISS CAPS representative? Her services are directed towards international students on main campus. Those are the students who are, they have to pay an international student fee, and that goes towards covering those services.
All right. Do repeat courses count toward the 9-unit in-person, 12-unit full-time status? They do, as long as we see each fall and spring semester that the student has at least 12 units overall, whereas 9 units are in person. That's okay. Students can fail classes as long as they've been enrolled appropriately, they will maintain their status.
Randy had a question. Does ISS also help with navigating things like vehicle purchases, obtaining driver's license, obtaining insurance and registration, off-campus housing, and leasing? We have some basic information in our success guide, and also in our tutorial. I can add a link to that in the chat. It's a good resource, but you can also refer students to our advising and we'll see the amount of assistance that we can provide.
All right. Do we have any other questions? All right. It looks like that is it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. We're here. We're around. Thank you again.